This video is brought to you by Squarespace. Stick around to the end of the video for a special offer they're making available through my channel. I will always script my reviews. I can't remember the last time I did an unscripted review, actually. I don't always script my impressions, but reviews, I really like to kind of sit there, really think it through, take my time with it. That is not a luxury I have here with Kena Bridge of Spirits. And the reason for that is that the code for this came in really, really late. If you have been keeping up to date with the discourse, the rumblings, you would have seen around social media, Twitter, Reddit, whatever, that there's some weird shit going on with the way that the developer Ember Labs handled review code for this. Specifically, very few outlets got review code, and it was weird how they were chosen. The review code went out super late, and the embargo for the review is essentially the minute the game launches, right? All of those three things are terrible signs. Whenever any game developer, publisher is doing that shit, you should immediately have, your spider sense is tingling with all that stuff, okay? Couple all of that with the fact that there wasn't a huge amount of preview coverage leading up to this, and there wasn't a huge amount of marketing either. It felt like we heard about it at the start when it was first revealed, and then nothing after that. And so people are wondering, like, did something go wrong in development? Did everyone kind of walk away from it? Is this game some disaster in the making? A lot of people feeling very anxious about Kena at this point, and I totally get that, because I felt that as I was trying to chase a code for this. I'm like, why is this so hard to get a hold of this code? Through a mixture of hustle and hassle, I got one. PC, which is what I'm reviewing it on today. I booted up this game expecting the worst. I really did expect some absolute disaster. I started playing it, and I'm like, wait a second, this doesn't suck. And then I kept playing, I'm like, still doesn't suck. After a few hours, all I could think was, what the hell was this developer doing with regards to this review code? Like, why didn't they send this out to everyone? Because this is actually really, really good. Alright, so let's talk technical aspects first. Now, obviously, this is on the PS5, and that's probably where you heard about it, as a PS5 game that was profiled during the PS5 reveal back in the day. I actually played this on PC, though, and it's exclusive to the Epic Store at the moment. I'm not sure if that's a timed exclusive, it'll arrive on Steam later, but for now it's on Epic. I reviewed this on an RTX 2080 Ti plugged into a 4K TV. That is a system that will generally struggle to run games at 4K 60. Older games, sure, but newer games, it is not going to handle that very well. Usually have to drop the settings or drop the resolution. This game runs remarkably well. Like, I was blown away by how well this runs. Obviously, the 2080 is still a strong card, but it cannot handle 4K 60 on a, next-gen looking game like this very often. As I was playing through, I was just constantly in awe of how well this ran. I was checking. I was like, are you sure this is at 4K? How can it run this well at 4K? But it did, and that was with every setting set to max as well. Speaking of which, the PC settings are actually pretty good. There's plenty of options in there to tweak things as you choose. There's also full keyboard button remapping and controller remapping as well. I did play the game with a controller. I don't ever play action games with a keyboard and mouse, so I had nothing to say about how that performs on that, but yeah, I use an Xbox controller. I had 0 crashes my entire playthrough. I had 0 bugs my entire playthrough. Frame drops were almost non-existent. The only time where I would get some frame drops or stuttering was when the game would transition out of one of its CG cutscenes into one of its in-engine cutscenes. And it was doing that without a load screen between that, so you could tell that the game was trying to load the game world back in after playing that cutscene. But, that was literally just like 2 or 3 seconds of stuttering, and then we were back on, okay? There are essentially no load times at all. Yeah, everything is basically instantaneous. Admittedly, I was playing on an SSD, but just because you're playing on an SSD doesn't mean you get fast load times. That's about how the game is built very often. And yeah, it's just basically instant. As soon as you die, you're straight back in there. When you fast travel, you immediately arrive. Like I said, no load screens between cutscenes. It's just a very, very, very well-built game, technically speaking. Really blown away at how well this runs. Really blown away by this level of polish from what is a small studio making their very first game. So kudos to that. But especially considering how unbelievably extraordinary Kena looks all the damn time. So I saw a couple of trailers leading up to Kena. Certainly that reveal trailer that we saw, back in the day. The first thing you note about Kena is like, holy shit, that looks incredible. I was not ready for how good this game would actually look when I was playing it. And I'm really pleased that I was able to provide this video to you in 4K. I really encourage you, if you have a 4K screen, if you're watching this on a phone or whatever, if you can get to like a 4K TV, boot this video up on that 4K TV just so you can see it, because you really need to see this game like on a proper monitor or a TV running at 4K to fully grasp just how extraordinary this game looks. It's very rare that I think a trailer undersells how good a game looks, but I really do feel that that is the case here in Kena. Kena has some absolutely stunning lighting. So you play as a spirit guide, where you have this kind of spirit pulse ability that will send energy out from you towards your environment, and different parts of the environment can actually soak up that energy, particularly these blue spirit crystals. Whenever that happens, it always just looks so good, particularly if you're in a dark cave. Like, you actually start the game in this really dimly lit cave, and you light the way with your own energy and with these spirit rocks as you move through it, such that the cave eventually becomes quite bright with this sort of bioluminescence that always looks incredible. The use of sunlight and god rays throughout different parts of it is also just so beautiful. On many occasions, I would stop and just remark at how good the lighting engine powering this game is. They really have put huge amounts of work into that, and it's paid huge dividends. The world is the true star of the show, though. It is open world, but it's better to think of it as kind of hub-based. You'll arrive in this village, and from there are different biomes that you can move into. There is this overgrown forest. There's one that's kind of like the ruined remains of a township. The third one is a perilous mountaintop, and there's also one other location, kind of... I won't spoil that one, okay? But there is one other location in the mix as well. So even though these spaces are quite familiar in terms of their archetype, they're still infused with such a unique beauty and identity. The township in the center is a real standout. It has these ruined houses that are this fusion of Eastern and Western architecture and art and style. They're kind of like a Ghibli fairy tale crossed with a Pixar fairy tale. And similar to the lighting, I just found myself just stopping to take it all in so often. Same with the vistas. My god, don't even get me started on the vistas. They just stretch endlessly. Clearly there is some very clever magic at work to kind of seamlessly transition from skyboxes to actual rendered geometry. But the net effect is that wherever you look, you just see stuff. It's this completely uninterrupted visual experience. We talk a lot about what is next gen, like, is this next gen? Have we arrived at next gen yet? Is this a next gen experience? Ratchet & Clank was one of those games where you're like, okay, this is definitely next gen is here. Well, I really don't have any hesitation in telling you that Kena is absolutely one of those experiences as well. And much like Ratchet, it also happens to play brilliantly. So I'll admit, I didn't really know what Kena was before I started playing it. I kind of saw the trailers and I thought, okay, that looks like a sort of all ages game. Everyone can play that, or play it with your kids, or hand it over to your kids and they can have a blast with it, and maybe they have to run around these levels collecting 50 jigsaw puzzles or something. I honestly didn't really know. It's definitely not that, though, I'll tell you that much. And I think that kids would really struggle with this, because there's definitely some hairy moments with a few of the boss fights in terms of difficulty spikes. Kena is essentially a semi-open world, third-person adventure game with Metroidvania elements. You start your journey with, your basic spirit pulse and, your ability to do heavy attacks and light attacks. And later on, you will unlock new abilities that are used in both combat as well as exploration. So the first ability you'll unlock is your bow, which looks really nice, by the way. It's really nice when you finally get your hands on that, and it's your staff, which you can bend back with spirit energy and fire off an arrow. And yeah, but you can also use that to traverse, because there are these sort of flowers littered throughout the world that you shoot them and it will kind of sort of hook shot you towards them, right? Later on, you'll unlock a spirit bomb, which you will throw at rocks and it will cause them to sort of temporarily float, and that opens up entirely new possibilities in terms of traversal and all sorts of other stuff. But similarly, the bombs can also be used in combat as well, right? So it is a third-person, semi-open world game. You might look at this and think, hey, that's kind of like Zelda, and it's like, well, yeah, lots of games are like that. It's pretty standard fare for third-person adventure games, but it's it does a good job of it. I think one of the through lines of Kena is that it really doesn't break a lot of new ground. You know, nothing here is standout in terms of its, you know, gameplay design, combat design. None of that is particularly new, but it's familiar, and it's just a very, very solid rendition of it, packaged up in an absolutely beautiful wrapper that I think goes a long way towards making the experience feel very special. But I don't want to sell short what Kena's doing in terms of its level design and puzzle design, because I actually think it does a really great job. I never ever found myself bored as I was playing through it. I never felt like repetitiveness was sort of setting in. Each of the new mechanics that were available to me really opened up different possibilities in terms of how I was thinking about this world and about these puzzles. In particular, the bomb and the ability to levitate rocks temporarily. When they are in the air, you can actually kind of like spin them around by shooting certain points on them. And the whole thing becomes this kind of, you know, sort of weird like Rubik's Cube thing that you're solving on the fly. You're looking at a 10 to 15 hour experience depending on how much time you take in each space to really explore it and find all its collectibles. But certainly throughout all of that time, I just found it a very well-paced adventure game, you know, and was always enjoying myself. Never felt like it dragged. It was always like, hey, here's a new area, here's a whole bunch of cool puzzles, here's some boss fights, let's go on to the next thing. And so I think the pacing of it is certainly one of its biggest strengths. Oh yeah, and the boss fights, they're really good too. Combat is actually where I think Kena becomes a bit complicated as a value proposition, because as I mentioned earlier, it presents very young. It looks like it would kind of be for kids, but then you start actually playing through this game and experiencing the combat, and particularly experiencing the bosses, and you're like, okay, this is definitely not for kids, right? In terms of difficulty, the way that it works is that, you know, there are obviously plenty of standard enemies running around. They have very low HP. You can hit them with just 1 or 2 hits and they'll drop. Peppered throughout, though, are mini-bosses. And these mini-bosses, they all kind of are grown from the forest, or most of them. They kind of look like Groot almost. But they have plenty of health, and they have pretty well-developed movesets. They have weak points on them. They're like quite sophisticated enemies in terms of their design, and they can really KO you very fast if you're not paying attention. You meet them as mini-bosses first, but later on they become just the enemies that you fight regularly, and more of them are woven into the game. So yeah, combat ramps up quite quickly actually, and you know, within I'd say the first like 3 or 4 hours, you're already facing off against some pretty tough opponents that might serve as a roadblock depending on how familiar you are with third-person combat. I don't think that Kena is a particularly difficult game overall. Certainly if you're experienced in this genre. If you've played some Dark Souls, obviously, that's the touch point when it comes to any melee game that's remotely difficult. We have to mention Dark Souls, right? That's the rules. But if you've played anything like that, you're not going to find this tough. However, if you've struggled with that sort of stuff in the past, then there is a chance that you might struggle with parts of Kena, because like I said, there are some pretty big difficulty spikes. Most of them are fine on the main route. However, there are some optional there's some side content and some challenge chests that are available as well that ask you to kill a certain number of enemies in a certain amount of time. They can get really tricky, and some of them I just straight up couldn't do. I mean, I might have done them had I spent more time with them, but I kind of tried them 3 or 4 times and then I moved on. You know what? Actually, I want to say this. The tuning of this game is so impressive. Like, this is anything but an amateur offering with regards to how this game has been tuned in terms of enemy damage output, your damage output, health pools, all of that stuff. Like, so many times I would die when I just had like a tiny amount of health left, because I was like, cool, this encounter has been set up just right based upon my power, my moveset, etc. I was so impressed by that consistently, you know. It's not easy to land that stuff, right? Tuning an encounter is not easy. And these guys, it's their first game, by the way. This is the first game from this studio. And with regards to combat difficulty and combat tuning, I was so impressed by that. This is not an amateur first-time offering at all. I suspect that the people on this team have done this before elsewhere, because I don't think you get to make something this good your first time around. Broadly speaking, though, combat is, you know, it's fine. Like, you've got, as I said, that light attack and that heavy attack. You have a dodge. You can, you know, shoot your arrow, throw a bomb. There's a parry with a fairly generous window that you can lean into. There are also upgrades available, but this stuff is not particularly impressive. It doesn't really add a lot to your kit. I think if I have one criticism of Kena, it's that your kit, you know, your moveset doesn't really evolve a lot. And so what you do in combat doesn't change a lot throughout the playthrough, right? You're always sort of spamming the same basic light attack, heavy attack combos. Your ability to express yourself through combat remains fairly static throughout the game. Combat does become more diverse and more sophisticated owing to enemy design, because the game is always throwing new enemies at you, involving new mechanics, forcing you to think on your feet and apply the skills that you have in a different way. However, that skill set, it stays very limited, and as I sort of look towards the horizon of a sequel for this game, you can certainly imagine that combat side of it will be fleshed out a lot more, because right now what's there is very functional, but very simple. But yeah, I certainly do hope there is a sequel for this game, because I think it's rather special, for reasons that I haven't really even described yet, so I guess let's talk about that now.
Where did we go?
So what I've described to you to this point is, semi-open world action adventure game with Metroidvania elements and Dark Souls inspired combat and bosses and difficulty, and it's all wrapped up in a really nice wrapper. Okay, it's really pretty looking, and you might think, okay, that sounds kind of generic, and I guess yeah, that's true. As I said earlier, I don't think Kena breaks a lot of new ground. It just does a lot of stuff that we know and have done before, but it does it extremely well, okay? The reason that I actually love Kena, and the reason that I'm strongly recommending it to you, is because of this X factor that I don't think anyone can properly communicate to you in a review. And it comes through in the personality that every part of this game is just bursting with. You might not know, this studio, Ember, they actually started out as an animation studio. You might have seen this Majora's Mask animation from back in the day. I'm not sure if that's what put them on the map, but that's certainly where a lot of people know them from. This is their very first game, but you can really tell or see their roots as an animation studio. Each of the world hubs represents its own little story arc with its own sort of cast of characters, and the stories that are being told are very much about like loss and acceptance, because you are a spirit guide. When it says Kena, Bridge of Spirits, your job is a bridge into the next world. That is what you do as a spirit guide. And so you encounter these people who are in this moment of loss and transition in their lives, and you need to help them kind of make sense of that. And the way that these stories are told is so poignant and so succinct, and so much is communicated with just like a small little like raise of an eyebrow, or the furrowing of a brow, or the way the characters shift and move as they run. You can tell this is a studio that has worked on short animations in the past and understands that you just get a few seconds to be able to tell a story and move exactly how to do that. Like every time these cutscenes rolled, I was just glued, and they're really short, but they just leave such a lasting impression on you. So many games are just stuffed with massive, long, drawn-out ass cutscenes that you just don't feel anything at the end of them. But this one, they're like 2 or 3 minute cutscenes max, and by the end you're just like, wow, you're just sitting there in this kind of like stunned silence, because they knew exactly how to move you in those brief few moments. That's the X factor of Kena, and I think, again, that's not something that any review is really going to be able to properly communicate to you. I really think that this is the start of a new IP. I do, because it's cool. You made a nice open worldy game with some combat and some puzzles and whatever. That's not particularly special, but I really feel like this world is special. These characters are special. The stories that are being told here is special, and the way they're being told is special. I think that there's so much talent within this studio, to think that they produce something like this on their first game. There's got to be suitors knocking at the door, man. Like, Sony's going to be like, hey, what's up? And they're whipping out the checkbook, because to make something of this quality on your first time round is so impressive. But more than that, to imbue it with this personality and to be able to tell stories this moving, to create worlds this beautiful, that's very rare indeed, I think. So Kena, Bridge of Spirits, like I said, it's not gonna break any new ground. I don't think this is a 10 out of 10 experience, but I absolutely believe that this will be on, more than a few people's Game of the Year list. I think that this is a really superb, beautifully made game that is, if it clicks with you, I think it's really going to stay with you. And I was really glad that I got the chance to play it, and I really hope you guys will check it out. It's on PS4, PS5, and the Epic Games Store. Yeah, enjoy yourself, and congratulations to the studio. That was a hell of a first go round. Squarespace, or as I like to call it, Squarespace. Now I know if you're a regular around these parts, you've heard of them before, but have you checked them out? Have you really looked at what Squarespace can do? Because if you did, you might be like, hey, that's pretty good. I need me some of that. I mean, obviously, Squarespace makes it easy to create professional-looking websites in minutes using its intuitive tools and custom design templates, obviously. But did you know about all the other stuff it can do? Did you know you can start your own business using Squarespace? If you make stuff to sell online, or you provide a service online, or you want a place to highlight your best work so that people can book you, Squarespace has all the tools you'll need for that, including end-to-end e-commerce tools, appointment booking, and analytics. There's even full social media integration, allowing you to connect with your potential customers wherever they are, allowing them to see what you make or do with ease. Squarespace isn't something you need to work up towards. You can literally just jump over there right now and start creating. So click the link in the description below, and if you like what you see and you want to get serious, visit squarespace.com/skillup for a 10% discount on your first purchase of a website or a domain name. Thanks Squarespace for sponsoring the video, and thank you for watching it. Thanks for watching my video. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up. If you didn't, give it a thumbs down so I know to do better for next time. If you enjoyed yourself, consider subscribing, and if you really enjoyed yourself, maybe consider hitting that notification bell so you never miss a video. You can see my patrons here on the left. They're awesome. They're amazing. If you want to join them, check out my Patreon page. Thank you again. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.